We have another repair video from RepairsUniverse.com. Today we'll be disassembling and reassembling the iPad Air 2. The tools needed to complete this repair are a plastic triangle opening tool, a small Phillips screwdriver, a nylon spudger, and a pair of fine-tip curved tweezers. We'll begin disassembly by heating around the edges of the LCD to soften the adhesive beneath. We'll insert a plastic triangle opening tool in between the glass and the aluminum back housing. If you begin to feel any resistance, please feel free to reapply heat. With the LCD now lifted, we'll remove the 3 screws and metal shield from over the LCD connections. With the metal cover now removed, we'll lift the 3 connections using a fine-tip curved tweezers. There's one on one ribbon, and then 2 on the ribbon beneath. The connection is now freed. We'll lift the LCD from the back housing. We'll remove the home button by lifting the clasp and freeing the ribbon from the back of the LCD. We'll heat the home button bracket and lift using a nylon spudger. With the bracket now removed, we will simply pry out the home button from the LCD assembly. We'll remove both loudspeakers from the bottom of the device. We'll lift the clasps and remove both ribbons. We'll remove the 2 small screws from the left loudspeaker. And we'll pry the loudspeaker from the back housing using a nylon spudger. We will repeat the process on the other side. 2 small screws on the bottom of the device. And pry from the back housing using a nylon spudger. We'll lift the foam tape from the top of the charging port assembly. Remove the 4 small screws, holding it in place. Loosen the ribbon from the back housing using a nylon spudger, and we'll pry the charging port from the device. The charging ports are now soldered onto the motherboard, so this is as far as we will disassemble the charging port. Remove the screw from the battery connection. We'll disconnect both Wi-Fi antennas. We'll remove the 4 small Phillips screws and metal shield covering the top of the device. With the metal cover now removed, we will remove the front-facing camera, remove the black adhesive tape from the ribbon, disconnect the connection, and then pry the front-facing camera from the rear housing. We'll remove 2 small Phillips screws and the metal plate over the headphone jack in the top left of the device. With the 2 small Phillips screws and metal plate removed, we will reveal 1 more screw on the headphone jack. We'll remove that small Phillips screw. Disconnect the headphone jack and left proximity sensor ribbon. We'll pry the ribbon from the back housing, and then slide the headphone jack out. To remove the Wi-Fi antennas, we'll remove one small Phillips screw from inside the device. And then 3 small Phillips from the top of the device. With the 3 screws removed, we'll now gently pry the Wi-Fi ribbon from the housing. The left Wi-Fi antenna is the same process. 1 small screw facing the battery on the inside of the device, and then 3 along the top. And gently pry to remove the Wi-Fi antenna from the housing. We'll then gently lift. There's a little bit of adhesive tape holding the Wi-Fi cables in. And we have the Wi-Fi antennas out of the device. We'll remove 1 small Phillips screw and a black bracket from over the power button. Remove the small rubber gasket covering the right ambient light sensor. We will disconnect and gently pry the rear-facing camera from the back housing. We'll disconnect the power button ribbon and gently lift the microphone from the back housing. Remove 2 small Phillips screws from the bracket. Remove the power button assembly, push the physical power button in, and set it aside. Remove the small Phillips screw and metal cover from over the volume button connection. Disconnect the volume button ribbon and remove the 4 small Phillips screws from the mounting bracket. We'll now gently remove the bracket, folding it over to reveal the microphone on the top right of the device. We will use the fine tip curved tweezers to gently pry the microphone from the housing. We can now take the volume button assembly out of the back housing. Push the volume buttons into the device, and then set them aside. From here, to remove the motherboard, we will gently heat the back of the device along where the motherboard sits. And then we'll gently pry the motherboard free using a plastic triangle opening tool. The motherboard is fairly fragile and rather flexible, so use caution when removing. The batteries are adhered along the edges of both cells, so make sure to run a plastic triangle opening tool and a nylon spudger along where the battery is adhered, and remove it from the device. To reassemble the iPad, we'll replace the battery, making sure to line up the battery connection with the screw post, and then press the battery back into the housing. We'll replace the motherboard, line up the battery connection. We'll then reseat the charging port. We'll replace the screw for the battery connection and the 4 small Phillips screws holding the charging port in place. We'll now replace the right loudspeaker. Simply push it back into place. Make sure to line up the screw holes and replace the 2 small Phillips screws. We'll then reattach the ribbon and then close the clasp. The left loudspeaker is the same process. Line up the screw holes. Replace both Phillips screws. Reconnect the ribbon and close the clasp. We will replace the left Wi-Fi antenna. Replace the 3 top screws. And the 1 screw inside the device. The right antenna is the same, 3 screws on top. And then 1 Phillips screw inside the device. We will re-adhere the Wi-Fi cables to the motherboard and back housing. And we will reconnect the Wi-Fi antenna button connections. We will replace the headphone jack and left ambient light sensor. There's 1 Phillips screw, the metal cover, and then the 2 small Phillips screws holding the metal cover in place. We'll reconnect the headphone jack and ambient light sensor, re-adhere and reconnect the front-facing camera, reapply the black adhesive tape to the front-facing camera ribbon, we replace the physical power button back into the device, replace the power button bracket, replace the 2 small Phillips screws holding the power button assembly in place. We'll re-adhere the microphone, reconnect the power button assembly connection, replace the rubber gasket over the right ambient light sensor, replace the small black bracket and Phillips screw from over the microphone. We will replace both physical volume buttons. Re-adhere the microphone from the volume button ribbon. We'll reseat the bracket. We will replace the 4 small Phillips screws from the volume button bracket. Reconnect the volume button ribbon. We will replace the small metal cover and the Phillips screw holding it down. We will reconnect the rear-facing camera and re-adhere it to the back housing. Replace the metal bracket making sure that the cutout is over the Wi-Fi ribbon cables. Replace the 4 Phillips screws. We'll reconnect the home button, close the clasp, reseat the home button, and then replace the bracket over the home button. We will reconnect all 3 connections from the LCD, the 2 on the first ribbon, and then the single connection on the outer ribbon. We'll now replace the metal shield and the 3 small Phillips screws that hold it in place. We'll reseat the LCD assembly into the back housing. And there you have it, another successful repair by RepairsUniverse.com. All of the parts and tools used today are available at RepairsUniverse.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter.